Hi, today we're going to take a quick look at the various purchasing analytics and the data that's stored in the system. Now, before we go into this, we really need to understand a little bit about how the system actually works in terms of how it stores data so we know how to extract that information. Now, to start off with, we obviously have our in-memory database called HANA, Higher Analytical Application, and this stores data in memory. Now, that's great because it allows us to mash a lot of data very quickly, do a lot of things, and store it and have that live data. But one of the issues with that is we can't really see that data very easily in a human readable format. So what we have is something called our core data services, which are essentially views which allow us to see the data in the HANA box in a human readable, easy to look at way. And what this does is it's like a translator, if you will, between the machine and the human way of looking at things. And that organizes the data for us in a kind of tabular view so that we can do stuff with it, such as pull reports and all those different things. When we come into looking at this data, there are various ways in which the user will actually see it. The first one, of course, is via Fiori, although I should say most of this is via Fiori. And what that allows us to do is to have our tiles in here, which will essentially show us all our different analytics presented to us. And the way that is working is essentially it's using the HANA database, although in many cases it will also be having a call into these core data services to figure out which kind of data we want. And it's showing that data real-time live to the end user. So for instance, we want to see how many purchase orders are open or how many contracts are expiring and things like that. And of course, that will show us that information here. But that's great, but it doesn't always give us everything we need. So of course we can drill down into these different sections if we wish. So what we can do here, of course, from here is we can drill down into this, let's say, purchase orders and get a nice analytical chart which will show us our purchase orders over time. And then of course we can ultimately drill down into the actual document data, which will show us the individual documents. And I'll show that in just a moment. However, if we want to do some retrospective reporting and really look at lots of information at once, there's a couple of ways we can do this. This idea of the core data service in terms of the actual data that's sitting in the system, we can simply go into those and take a look at them and play with them and actually drill down into the different levels of data to see what that actual data is. And there are many of these CDSs in the system because, of course, we have lots of different areas of reporting, such as purchasing, sales, accounting, work orders, the whole lot. So lots and lots of these core data service templates, if you will, in the system. Remember, that's just a way of looking at the data in a tabular type format for all the information for a particular area. Now that's great, and again we can do that via Fiori, but often when we're doing really heavy lifting when it comes to our reporting, what we want to do is we want to be able to go in here and just see that in Excel. So what we can do is essentially we can link Excel to our CDS, or core data service, and what that allows me then to do is to view the information in Excel, change it, mess about with it, and I'll show you that in just a second as well. So there's kind of like two different ways of doing it, if you like. One is the everyday end user in here, where we have the information presented to us, and it's pertinent data for running our business. But if you want to really go into that data and really mess about with it and pull it in different ways and match it and mash it together and things like that, we have the detail view, which is obviously this view here. And if I want to, I can see the same detail in an Excel format instead. I'll show you both of those in just a second. The final part of this is our true analytical engine. Now, what this allows me to do, and this is really nice, is it allows me to create my own little charts, analytics, and all that kind of stuff, and create my own dashboards with numbers all together in the system, which is awesome because then, of course, I can link that back to a Fiori tile in here and simply link as a dashboard. Let's put DB there. So when I click on that, it opens my dashboard up and I can play with all my information. So different layers, ultimately everything is always going back to our HANA database here where the information is stored and we have all the data, But what we do is we use this kind of translator, which is the core data service, to allow us to expose it using these different methods here. One being, of course, just the tiles, the other one being the detail, and the other one being creating our dashboards. So let me show you how that looks. So let's get into the system here. So this is what a user would normally see when they log into the system. Here we have our tiles, as I mentioned earlier, and again, this is reading this data live from the HANA database. You can see here some of this was updated a few minutes ago because I've just been talking, but if I drill into these and come back out, or if I hit the refresh button, obviously they start updating because it's looking at core data in the system. So it's always pulling that latest information through. So for instance, this is presented to me and I can see, oh, okay, I've got a few overdue purchase orders here and things like that. I can drill down into these tiles if I want to and do some basic reporting on them. So here I can see I've got the spend of the last year, and there seems to be a lot of spend in this high-tech area because I'm looking at this, sorry, that's a vendor high-tech. So rather than looking at it by supplier, I might want to look at it by material group, for instance. Let's have a look at the different material groups that we've got in here. I've got a material group called Material Group 2, not very imaginative in this demonstration, but let's take a look at that in more detail. And what I might want to see is which suppliers have been supplying Material Group 2. So I can go into that and then drill down into that. And I can see, okay, not surprisingly, because we started there, that there's two vendors, high-tech and another one called a US vendor. But let's say I want to drill down into more detail. I can do that and select document, and it will actually show me all the purchase orders that were punched into the system or created via MRP, depending on how the system works, to actually to pull up these different purchase orders. So that's how we can drill down into this. And of course, if I want to put that into Excel, I can click on the Excel button here. Or if I want to change this view, because I don't like the fields that are displayed in here, I can select this settings button and change which fields are actually selected to me. I can add sortation. I can add groups into here, so I can do calculations by basic groups. But it's pretty basic. We've still got a lot of data missing. If I want to go back up my tree, you can see here I started off by a supplier, then material group. If I want to go back, I simply select the tab at the top and it will take me to a different area. I could select, okay, let's take trading materials and raw materials and that kind of thing. And I can actually look at that in a different way. You get the basic idea. So you can navigate around the data that way if we wish, or I can simply use the back button to go back to my previous analytic, and eventually as I go back up the level of detail, I'll get back to my tile screen again. So that's the everyday operational way we look at information in here. We've got the information at our fingertips. The system's alerting me to information that may not be as good as it should be straight away as I log in and the information is updated. However, that's not always what we want to do. Sometimes I want to look at an overview and I might want to drill down and look at everything about a particular vendor in one space. So this is where we use our overview type screens. Imagine this as a dashboard, if you will. So what we can do now is if I go in here, this will give me all of my vendors based on my user profile to say, okay, these are your vendors in your material organization. And here I can see how those vendors are performing, all of them. And if I want to see an individual, I can simply select it. I'll show that in just a second. We can see the spend trend, different types of items, what's catalog, non-catalog, so on and so forth. I've got my contracts here as well, and if I select my contracts, I can see all of my contracts in the system if I so wish. And of course, I could drill down further into those contracts and see them. Just showing you how this works here. So here's all my contracts. And if I wanted to see the contracts in detail, of course, I could go into them and see what purchase orders have been spent against them, so on and so forth, if I wanted to, but I won't do that in this case. So what's quite interesting about this is it's the same kind of look and feel as the tiles we saw a moment ago, but where it differs is this filtering option at the top here. So at the moment I'm looking at all of my vendors, and you can see here I've got lots of different vendors, Polaris Brakes, domestic US supplier, and I see everything about all of those suppliers. But let's say I'm not really interested in looking at everything. I've got a problem with one of my vendors, let's say Polaris Brakes here. So what I can do is I can actually narrow this whole overview down to an individual or a group of suppliers. So in this case, if I just click on an individual, what this will do then is filter all of these different metrics, so that's supply performance, the spend trend, all that kind of stuff, down to just that one individual. So I can see any contracts that I've got issues with, I can see their spend, what are we spending with them. I can see quite a lot of this is actually a material group called material group item GUI. Oh, I've just clicked on that, which will take me into the, as you can see before, here we go, we can split that down into more purchasing groups that belong to that material group. And just like before, we can drill down into it. So again, it's same kind of data. You don't have to retrain people on this. As soon as you click, it will go through. But what I wanted to show you there is if I wanted to see everything about this particular one supplier, I've got everything about him in one space. And if I click on his performance, for instance, it looks like strange because it's just one dot, but what that's telling me is his performance is around 70%. I can then see what type of performance do we have and why are they scoring in that way. So what's his delivery in full on time against his operational performance, time variance, so on and so forth. So that's how we can take an overview of all our vendors and drill down to a single one, all within the Fiori screen here, which is great. And often that's the information we need and helps us with our operational day to day. However, if we want to go down into more detail, also do, which is really nice, is instead of doing that, I can actually choose to do this in Excel. So if I do it in Excel, what this allows me to do is you can see here I've got Microsoft Excel, and we've added a little add-in to Excel, which is our analysis add-in. And essentially, when I click on insert data source, the system will ask me which system am I using. And again, most users wouldn't need to have multiple systems because they only have one. This is a demonstration system, so I've got a few in here. So I have to select what system, and then it says which area you're interested in, what area, so let's say we're looking at financial accounting this time. So I want to look at maybe trial balances, or instead, if I want to, I don't know really what I'm looking for, I can just search and pull up one of the CDS views, or these core data views, if I will, straight from the system. Now, it'll always ask me some basic information because it says, what do you want to look at? Because there's a lot of information in the system. So it always offers me the ability to filter the information before I show anything on the screen, because it tries to narrow down how much information I want to look at immediately, so I don't end up with millions and millions of rows if we've got years and years and years of data. And once I've done that, what it's now showing me is the data source has all these different fields in here. So we can see all the different data fields. I can go into different hierarchies and all that kind of stuff. And I can simply drag and drop those into what we call my rows or columns. And what the system will automatically do is start to add and aggregate that data together. So I can build some really powerful reports in here really, really quickly, and it's a bit more user-friendly than the previous view we had, which was really kind of the raw data. So the previous view we had was more of like an expert view. This is really what we'd have from the end user point of view, is using Excel to play with the data. So let's take another look at a slightly different one here. Same kind of thing again. Let's go into a different area. Sales this time. Could have, of course, chosen materials management or procurement, but we've already seen one of those. Again, it's asking me for some base data in here. What do you want to see? So let's put a currency in. It always asks for some base data before we run any report to ensure that we're not pulling up too much information in one go. And again, you can see here, because this is a sales report, we've got things like billing data, all that kind of stuff. And here I'm starting to add some different totals and things like that in here, like order quantity. You want to see the net amount of the orders, all those different elements. I'm starting to build the report. So let's say I want to do this by material. So I want to see all my orders by material. I can add material to the row. And what I've now got here is, of course, all the different materials in the system and their order quantities. So that's how we can basically build our own reports. Once we're happy with those views, we can save them, we can share them, and those types of things, and allow other users to have access to them if I wish. So that's just two ways of looking at the data, the core data in the system. But another way of doing it, once we've got that core data, is how do we then view it? And this is where our true kind of analytical views start to come in. So this is a dashboard that I've already created on a bit of spend, but let me show you how I would create, change and play with this dashboard. So let's say I want to add a new analytical chart in here. So what I can do is I click on Insert, and it will say, okay, what kind of chart do you want to put in? Do I want to put a pie chart? Do I want to put a trend chart in, a comparison chart? And there's lots of different types in here, as you can see. But let's just stick with a nice easy bar chart to start with, because let's keep it simple. And then it will say, okay, you need to add a measure and a dimension, or multiple measures and dimensions. What is a measure? What's a dimension? A measure is essentially how do we measure the information. So let's look at that. And here I can see all my all my different measures from the view that I've selected. So in this case, let's say I want to look at let's say the PO count, or something like that. So let's say all the purchase orders, how many purchase orders essentially is what that's saying. Okay, so now we can start to see the data starting to come in. Let's make that a little bigger so we can see a little easier. So you can see how easy it is to drag and drop and move things around. Let's say I wanted to put this chart at the top. I can drag and drop and move it about and all that kind of stuff. It's all very, very simple to do. But I don't really have much in here at the moment. Let's say I want to see that count by something, so I can add dimensions. So let's say I want to add the count of all my purchase orders by, let's say, region, for instance. So let's put in region here, and I can see here, this obviously is national data I've got in the system, so I can see there's lots of different regions in here. Let's say I'm not really interested in that. Let's say I want to do it by city or something like that. It really depends on what you want to do it by. So let's say vendor city will do. There you are. Okay, so I can now see my spend by city. Looks like I've got some anomalies in there, but, but again, you know, this is very easy to do for a user. We don't need to go on a 2-week training course or anything. And you'll notice that now I've got some data in here, I've got these little buttons down the side, and what these allow me to do is to make this a little bit more meaningful for me. So let's say I want to do like the top 5. What are the biggest cities in terms of top 5 spend? So I can see here I've got that. These are my top 5 cities. If I want to do, let's just say a top 10 or top 20 or something like that, I could do, obviously you've got bottom and top and that kind of stuff in here. Say I want the top 20, let's put that in there. So here I can see, looks like San Jose's been spending some money. So I've got my top 20 cities. So that's how we create the analytics. So very easy to change. If I want to change colors and filters and all that kind of stuff, I can do if I want to. Very, very easy to do. And as I said earlier, if I want to move these around, I can just drag and drop them in my dashboard and put them where I want, all that kind of stuff. And if I'm happy with it, I simply go to save. I'm not going to do that in this case, but obviously everyone knows what the save button is. If I wanted to share that, I can share that story with, or this dashboard with other users. But what this allows us to do as well is something that's called data mining, and this is where things start to look into more data and actually get some value out of it. So let's take this one here where I've got my PO count and my PO spend by category. I'm just going to make that full size so we can see that one analytic on the full screen there rather than part of the dashboard. And what I can do is I can see I've got a lot of unclassified spend at the moment. So I'm not really going to be able to get many insights until we get catalogs loaded and things like that. And this is quite common until we start using catalogs and things. So I'm going to exclude that value so I can see the rest of my spend by detail, a bit more information. So it looks like I've got a lot of spend in telecom, but I've also got a lot of spend in facilities and construction too. So that's kind of interesting. I might want to drill down into that and see a bit more about it. Now, one of the interesting things here is if I select that column, you'll notice I get this little light bulb coming up. And what this allows the system to do is to use its inbuilt intelligence to show me what's interesting about that particular set of data. So if I click on Smart Insights, what the system will do is it will look at the information and analyze it and provide to me what is interesting about that data. So it's showing me that the South Island North is significantly higher in terms of spend for facilities than any of my other regions. So that's quite interesting. If I look at this one, it's saying that where there's no value here, which is obviously interesting because there's no vendor against the data, which is a bit odd. Yeah, and again, it's showing me that South Island is showing me, well, there's some issues here. So what I can do, if I want to, I could add that as a chart, and it will add that to my dashboard. Let's do that just while we're here. Great. So that will now add that as a chart in my basic view. If I just pop back to my view in here, so I can see here I've got a new chart. It's called, and I can then move it and resize it and all those good things if I want to. But let's go into this in a bit more detail. So let's have a look at that, and that's in that South Island. If I go to my insights and drill down even more, what it will start doing is analysing that in more ways for me. And I can see straight away, it's quite interesting because for facilities, for that one location, I've actually got many vendors in here. So I might want to do something like put out an RFP for facilities in that location and maybe say, okay, let's try and get down to one vendor and things like that. And that's really what this data mining is all about, is being able to look at all your information and analytically view it in many different ways. So that was just a very, very quick view in terms of how we can see these different areas of information. So there, we were always using the same information in the system, always looking at the HANA database. We started off by looking at how we can interpret that by operational tiles, presenting the information to me, and then getting an overview where I can drill down into the information and get analytics. We had a quick look at the kind of technical CDS views there, the core data services, so we can drill down into the data if you want to. But more interestingly, how I can view that information in Excel and save those views and make it more interesting to me, and how I can interpret that in my different analytics and build my own analytical views and dashboards here, and make them presentable by sharing them and things like that. So that was a whirlwind trip around the data in HANA and how we can actually look at it and display it in different ways. I hope that was useful.